We are live, ladies and
We're
gentlemen.
live.
Okay, right. Welcome one, welcome all. Actually, let us know where you're from. Let us know in the chat. Also, give us an emoji. At the bottom, you have the power of the emojis in this session. My word, use them.
I see Michelle from Maryland.
There you go. Halifax, Nova Scotia representing the house. We've got loves, we've got smiles, we've got
Minna from Halifax. Nice to see you there.
All going on. So, ladies and gents, in this session, we bring to you Mitch. He's joined us from Toronto, and he's going to be talking through brain-friendly strategies for learning design. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, Mitch, the stage is yours right now. And if you've got a Q&A, we'll be doing that at the end of the session. So, enjoy.
All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, John, where'd you go? You still there?
Don't worry. I'm just in the background. People don't need to see my face.
Oh, but I need you right now for an example.
Because, well, I will be your example then.
Because for everyone, this conference, first of all, my nerves have gone down a little bit. The moment when it's like stage fright, the moment when you're asked to speak, suddenly you can speak. So I want to welcome everybody to this session. I think it might be a little different, or it might be just the same as everything else you've seen. So we'll see what happens. I want John to stick around though, because I'm going to go a little off topic, not off topic, but I'm going to allow my brain to catch things as they come, because this is a conference, this is a session, this is a workshop. So we're going to try and get some of you involved here. And I think about this, and this is also my first time. So I think about what I don't like about conferences that I've been to, because I've been to a lot of conferences and there's a lot that I don't like about them, partly because I'm not, I'm going to talk a lot during this. You're going to hear me talk more now than I usually ever do to people at parties or whatever. They get bored and move away. So you're not really stuck, you can quit. I went to some sessions yesterday and I quit because I didn't find them interesting, or they were things that I'd already known. But what I don't like about the conferences is that you go there to experience somebody, you go there to meet somebody or hear from somebody whose work you admire, or that what they're about, and they go up and they give their spiel, and you don't really get to know them. They might be a terrible person, and you might find out that later. And then, does that affect how you respond to what they said or not? Does the kind of person you are affect how you analyze things, or how you experience things, and how you interpret things for other people? Or the people that they might interact with are people who stand in line afterwards to talk to them, or that they meet in a networking session, or they sit with at lunch. And there are people who are very good at talking to people in those situations, and I'm not one of them. So the networking aspect, to an extent, is one thing but that's on me, or it's partly on me, because I think conferences should do more to not just encourage, but to facilitate people getting together. And that's one thing, for example, that an online training experience, you have breakout rooms, you put a few people in a room together, they might actually be more involved than they might be if you were in a classroom session and you did the same thing, because people sort of clam up and you can't sort of go around the horn. Or you could, but in an online world, sometimes it happens differently. So the medium affects how things happen. But I kind of think that it isn't necessarily what the speaker is there to share with me or with the group that is really important. It might more be getting to know them and understand them, and how they think and why they think the way they do. Because learning is bringing your experiences to bear on new information. And in the case of a conference speaker, the new information might be what they present to you, but the real new information is them themselves, because they're the source of what they bring to you, unless they're just bringing you somebody else's information, or they're using slides as a kind of an in-between. So that's one reason that I'm talking to you so much right now straight to the camera, is because I think that the value in doing this kind of thing and being here live, right? It's like live TV. I'm live. I'm here. My brain is here now. I'm not a recording, although you might see this later. If you do, hi, how are you? But I'm live and you're live and we're all sitting here. And that's the value of being in the same room with someone. It's not necessarily getting through all the slides in time or covering off all the material or whatever. Now, the reason I wanted John to stick around, oh, look, emojis, those are cool. Now, I first saw those on, I think it was Periscope. Periscope is a live broadcast app that Twitter owns now, and Facebook Live does the same thing. And some of these apps where people talk directly to their audiences and they get those emojis, but they also get, like, there's no chat to the side. The chat comes right on the screen. You can see what people are thinking, what people are saying right away. And it's very, very interactive. And I kind of think that training and development can learn a little bit from that kind of experience. Now, as I said, this is my first time speaking at a conference. I don't even, John, how many people are out there?
So we've got 15.
15? That one in the corner? Okay. So great. 15 is a great manageable number. Now, John has done this kind of thing before, right? You have spoken at conferences.
I have a few.
Yes. You've spoken at conferences. You lead the GLDC every week. You're experienced with this sort of situation. And there's and in the training for this conference, because we had to do a couple of training sessions, I think the tendency was by the conference organizers to say, this is how a conference is and you're new, so this is how, we'll help you to do it the way it's always been done, because, you're new and you need something to hang on to. And John, is that fair?
It's trying to help people with a tried and tested method. I think that's the best thing. And especially, with first-time speakers, trying to give that guidance. That was a massive thing that we found when we were reaching out to people, was how can we help them with almost like a playbook?
Yeah.
That was a key thing.
Yeah. So I'm going kind of off the playbook, and because the playbook has to do with having a structured presentation where there's, A, B, C, and then questions, and you have the slides up and you go through them, right? So I do have some slides. We might get to them. But one of the things I want to talk about today, and also I'll go into a little bit what I want to talk about, is the differences between 21st century neuroscience and 20th century neuroscience, which is really 20th century psychology, because psychology and neuroscience were very disparate in the 20th century. In the 21st century, they've gotten much closer together. Psychology has been fading a little bit because we've been learning so much through neuroscience, because we can now see into the brain, we can see what people are thinking. Just to explain that for a second, just shoot me some emojis if you know what fMRI is. There we go. 3. There we go. Okay. So fMRI, MRI, you're probably familiar with, the magnetic resonance imagery. I probably got that wrong. Anyway, but it's taking a picture of the brain, but it's a still photograph. fMRI is functional MRI, and you can watch how blood oxygen reorganizes itself in the brain while somebody is thinking. So you can show them a picture. There was an interesting experiment about love. They showed a picture of the loved one, someone they were intimate with, and pictures of friends. And they saw how the blood oxygen levels in the brain reorganized themselves differently. And the interpretation is that if blood goes to a certain area of the brain, it means that that area is being used more so than not. And so they found out that, for instance, people in love, a lot of the same brain areas that lit up when people are on drugs, lit up when they're looking at a picture of their loved ones, and those pieces didn't overlap with when they were looking at friends, which is why love is the original addictive drug. And everything we do for addiction is trying to get back there, trying to reproduce that feeling. At least that's my interpretation of that, which is interpretation, which is like what all science is. And you have to think about who's doing the interpreting. So for much of scientific history, it's been men, and it's usually been Caucasian men because they were the ones doing, and a lot of the science was done on, college students, because that's who was available for the pool. So, for example, different racialized demographics were not taken into account. And sometimes, for instance, Alzheimer's research was largely done on men, where it mostly affects women. So there are differences in there, and then there's interpretation. So all of the science you have to take with a grain of salt, and you have to consider the source. And most of us receive scientific information in a secondhand kind of manner. We read it in a blog, we hear it from somebody at a conference or whatever, and we don't usually go to find out what it's really about. So thank you, John. I'll release you now. John is the experience.
I'll be in the background though.
Because he's the experienced speaker and I'm the inexperienced speaker. So there's a bit of that's going to happen. So before I go on to my slides, so let me tell you what the slides talk about first, so you know what you're getting into. As promised in the description, I was going to talk about sort of advances from 20th to 21st century neuroscience, the things we talked about then and the things to talk about now, largely because of fMRI, which became to prominence in the 90s as a way of investigating brain function. And then I was going to talk about a 20th century theory, cognitive theory, that has been applied to learning called cognitive load theory, and compare that with the 21st century cognitive theory, desirable difficulties, and sort of talk about that. So before I go on, if I can get, I guess some emojis is the nice anonymous way to respond. How many people think they know what cognitive load is about? Okay, great. Lots of people. Does anybody want to put their hand up and take the mic and let us know? So the hand up button is John. I need you again.
I'm here.
Great.
So if you would like to get on board, then down at the bottom in the center, you will see a hand up. If you select that, then it will give us a notification over on here to...
Right, it's not on my screen. That's why I couldn't see it.
There you go. Can't have you putting your hand up, be asking yourself the same question. But if somebody does want to come on board, they can raise their hand and then we will bring you on board.
Okay, there were a lot of people who said they knew what cognitive load is. We just need one person.
Any volunteers?
Come on. Come on. You have like 15 people listening to you.
You do, but it's also who is... Oh, wait a minute. We've got one.
There we go.
Bringing them through.
Yay. Karthik, how you doing?
Good. Hello.
All right.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to get Karthik on my podcast for a while. He's too busy. So let's go. What do you want to say about cognitive load?
My best understanding of it is that each of us has a limited set of things that we can hold in our memory at a given point in time. So it's called the working memory. So apparently you can hold about 7 to 8 bits of information in your working memory. So anything more than that causes cognitive load, where you just can't hold anything more than those 6-7 bits of information. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you, Karthik. So that is what a lot of people understand cognitive load to be, but it's not. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to keep talking. So first I'm going to keep talking. The research on how much you can hold in working memory is real research, and it's well documented, and it's led to the idea of chunking information instead of, because you can hold chunks. You can't just hold necessarily 7 things. You can hold 7 chunks, or 4 to 7 chunks at a time in working memory use them to process. And then it doesn't mean you can't add anything to that. It means that, and this is partly how it's been misinterpreted. People say, oh, if you add on to that, whatever's in there gets pushed out and it's forgotten. That's not necessarily what happens. It's a very simplistic sort of model. Memory, people who try to memorize, these people who go to memory contests and they memorize these huge things, they use this techniques for chunking and for making things into packages. And they can have a whole bunch of things in that package. They can create a whole story inside a package and like go from room to room to in a house to try to remember things. And they can remember, they have amazing memories, or it seems like they have amazing memories. What they really have is they've organized the information in such a way that they can access it one piece at a time. So let's go on to see what cognitive load really is. So let's share screen. Bear with me. I was just learning how to do this 5 seconds ago. And I don't know how to turn off my phone, so I'm just going to answer this. And hi, I'm busy. Okay. Share button. Ta-da! Far out. All right. I got to get some points for that. Now, I'm supposed to go in presentation mode, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to show you what's here because I think you can see it. All right. Because I can see it. So I'm going to skip the 20th, 21st century for now and go on to cognitive load theory because we started talking about it. So it was coined in 1988 by John Sweller, who is still out there working at the university. I think he's in Australia. And it's usually used as shorthand for don't have a bunch of crap on the screen. So that's sort of what Karthik was saying. You can hold so many things in memory. And if you have too much there, so you have too many graphics or too many distractions on the screen or whatever, then that's going to be too much to look at. You're not really going to take anything in. So you want to avoid that. And that's a good idea, but that's just a visual design principle that's been around for ages. The original paper was part of a field of inquiry regarding characteristics distinguishing experts from novices. So this was a field of study in the 20th century. It's still around today. There's still papers being written on it. But the idea was educational psychologists said to themselves, okay, so some people learn really quickly. And some people, it's very, very hard to get through problems. And they were thinking about, they did experiments with chess and math. That's sort of where their focus was in terms of their examples of things that you try to learn. And the original paper was part of this inquiry that said, okay, the people who learn really fast, let's call them experts. The people who are new to material and have difficulty with, let's call them novices. And what is the difference between experts and novices? Why is their experience of this new information? And I'll repeat the thing that I said this morning, which I just thought of this morning. I tweeted it out. I think it's really good. It's learning is bringing your experience to bear on new information. So that was the difference between experts and novices. Basically, the experts brought a lot of experience to bear on the chessboard that they were looking at or on the math problem that they were looking at. And Sweller describes these things as schemas, so schematics. So basically, you have learned something already. You've got an image of it. You've got, diagrams of things in your head relating to it. You've got experience with it. And the experiences put those things together. And then when you encounter new information, like a new chessboard or a new math problem, you bring these schemas to bear on it. And that's why you can learn new things much faster. And for new people, they don't have that. So cognitive load theory, so over time you develop schemas, and then learning new things requires reduces the cognitive load on your working memory, or however you want to call it. And if you're learning from scratch and you can't see the forest for the trees because you don't understand anything, you bring a lot of cognitive resources to bear just for learning. And what Sweller was saying was that the effort of learning and figuring things out and the problem-solving aspect didn't overlap a lot, or overlap too much with the effort to bring your experiences to bear on it. And so teaching problem solving by step kind of thing was not the way to go. You have to try and help them build these schemas and understand the big picture before you start teaching the little things. And that's what cognitive load theory is about from the initial thing. Swallow developed this into the idea that schemas live in long-term memory, so the goal of learning should be to midwife the process of developing these schemas. And since working memory is feeble and transitory, we have to be careful not to overload it when presenting learning materials, so they will have a chance, not have a chance to getting into long-term memory. So the one on the right is what cognitive load theory has really become understood as. And the one on the left is really what he meant by it. Okay, is there anybody who understood that that was what cognitive load theory was to begin with? Give me some emojis. All right. Cool. So this is a kind of simplistic model of working memory you've probably seen before, which is what a lot of people talk about when they talk about cognitive load. So the reason I'm bringing this up is it's an example of research. It was, it started off in one area of study of educational psychology, experts versus novices, what distinguishes them, what can we learn from that in order to help novices become experts faster, basically. And then that research was extrapolated upon to create some tips for education. And those are here. Oops, those are here. That's from Sweller's 1988 paper, not the original one that coined the phrase cognitive load, but one that was written around the same time, trying to apply those ideas to education. Now, I have this, I'll briefly go through some of my objections. The goal of any structure should be to reduce extraneous cognitive load. To increase germane cognitive load, structures can accomplish this in a variety of ways. So basically that means only present people with relevant information, try not to give them irrelevant information. So that kind of makes sense. However, sifting through junk, sifting through irrelevant information is what the brain does best. It's really what we're designed to do. It's not just us, all animals, anything with the brain. That's what the brain does, is it encounters this vast array of irrelevant information, and there's some irrelevant information in it, and this relevant realization, which is a John Vervaeke phrase in cognitive science, is the task of the brain. We're always confronted with huge amounts of information, and we have to extract what's relevant from it. So if this is what the brain does best, only presenting relevant information robs it of the opportunity to do some of the sifting, which is natural to it. So we might be missing something by only presenting relevant information and not allowing the brain to do some sorting out. His second point, change problem-solving methods to avoid means and approaches that impose heavy working memory load by using goal-free problems or worked examples. So that basically means don't focus on, like I said, the trees, focus on the forest and try and get them to see the forest. The problem with that is some kinds of content require the kind of slogging and are just that. You know, this point kind of tries to say, you know, make it easy for people, pre-digest things and give it to them. And you can't always do that. You have to get those basics down. You have to sometimes slog through things that you don't understand and then sleep on it and then have a eureka moment and understand it to get through. So I'm going to send you this this PDF. John, how are we doing for time? Is he there?
I'm here. I'm always here.
25 minutes.
Yeah, 25 minutes. You got another 20 minutes to
20 left.
in rank. So yeah,
all
give
right.
it to the people.
So let me just ask everybody with emojis, do you want me to continue down the 3 next points or get on to the next thing? Because I'm going to send you this PDF. Okay, emojis for continuing with this next 3 points. Okay, we got a bunch of
emojis.
people.
We're getting a lot of thumbs
Very
up.
good. I like that emoji thing. It's really quick. So the next one is physically integrate multiple sources of information whenever possible to eliminate the need for learners to have to mentally integrate that information, which increases the load on working memory. So keep it simple. The KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, which is usually a good idea. So what's wrong with that? Making it too easy robs the brain of the chance to build complexity, which in the end makes learning easier. So this gets us on to a little bit to metacognition. So emojis for who knows what metacognition is. All right. Okay. I thought there'd be some. There's one. Yay. 1, 2, 3. Happy face. Oh, there's a few. Okay. So somebody put your hand up and tell us what metacognition is, please. Hands up, baby, hands up. Give me your heart. I did not plan to do this, I tell you. Okay. No hands up? Come on.
I don't think there's anybody going to give you that.
No. There were like 7 or 8 people who know what metacognition is. Somebody's got to tell us. Come on, man. There's 16 of you out there.
You might be camera shy.
No. I'm camera shy.
Come on, you've got a face for TV.
I'm
a face
camera
for
shy.
radio. Now,
okay, no volunteers. Okay, that was long enough. I really did want. Is anybody coming in there?
They can pop in the chat if they really want.
Oh, in the chat. Is anything in the chat?
Anything in the chat?
No. Okay, I'm not. Chat is a cop out. You got to raise your hand. You got to talk to the camera. You got 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so metacognition is basically, people talk about it as thinking about thinking. And I like to think of it as thinking about experience. So let's say, let's say everybody has the experience of waking up in the morning. All right, you're asleep and then you're awake. And in between, there's maybe some noise, some making up, some thoughts, or you hear some things, whatever. But whatever that experience is, we've all had it, and we've all had it a million times. But if you don't stop and do some experiments, or at least think about, or try to pay attention to what happens during that period, then you don't understand it. And so this is an experience. Waking up is an experience. You've had the experience a million times, but you don't understand it because you've never even thought about it. So thinking about your experiences is metacognition. And it's how we learn. If you don't think about your experiences, then you never learn anything. So this little conversation we have with ourselves in our heads is where you want to get to when you're teaching. You want to get that place in the learner. You want them to think about it. That's why, for instance, I'm asking people to say what they know about things. And that's why I'm using this slide to show you like one part and then revealing another part. And later on, it's what I'm going to do when I ask a question and I don't give the answer. We go on to material and then I'll ask you the same question later if we get that far. But those sorts of things are designed to get you to think about the problem before you're given the answer. And activating that kind of metacognitive activity, which we all do all the time, and not just humans, is key to learning. If that doesn't happen, if you just sit there and watch the slides or listen to the thing, or maybe you're playing on your phone while you're trying to listen, you're not going to actually learn anything because you're not thinking about it. You're not having a conversation with yourself, bringing your experience to bear on the new information. All right. So making things too easily, simplifying things too much, leaving out that complexity. There's another area, and you can Google all this stuff. So another thing you can Google is cognitive complexification. So by doing things like sifting through junk to find the relevant information, by doing things by being presented with information that isn't totally clear at first and having to sort it out, or being presented with complex information. And that's one of Sweller's things. He said that the more schema people have built up on us around a certain topic area, the more complex information you can present to them, and they'll be able to deal with it. And if you have novices, people without the schemas, you have to simplify things for them. But I think there's a problem with that, because dealing with complex information is something that the brain knows how to do. And it helps complexify our thinking processes as well. So people who do a lot of metacognition, we call them thinkers, we call them gurus or whatever, they achieve a level of complexification that allows them to be really good learners and really good experiencers and really good at bringing their experience to bear on new information and new things that happen to them. And this complexification makes learning easier. It's part of, he describes it as acquiring schemas. You don't really acquire schemas. It's not a thing that you develop and then it's there, right? I think what really happens is the complexification of your neural circuitry, which makes things easier to then learn, because you not only have schemas to put against it, you have neural pathways that have been exercised and that have been activated and are therefore useful. There's a lot of research about the brain. I'll give you one quick example where they've discovered that, for example, dyslexics, there's a part of the brain that most people use when they read that dyslexics don't use. And that's why they have trouble reading. So reading is visual input, and there should be audio input as well. Because when you learn to read, you read out loud to start with. You say the letters and then you read out loud. And then when you stop reading out loud, you still read to yourself. Some people move their lips, and some people can read in silence faster than other people because we're reading it out loud to ourselves in our head. So language has visual and audio component. And in the frontal lobe, there's an area of executive function that takes these two inputs and puts them together. And they found out in the dyslexic people, this frontal lobe area wasn't activated. So they could see perfectly fine and they could hear perfectly fine, but it wasn't being put together. And by activating that area, because that area did other things as well. So if you give it some other things to do that gets it moving, then you develop those muscles, so to speak. People became better at reading because the brain area that was responsible for it was looking for things to do. So if you do make things too easy, you don't get that complexification, and it makes things harder. For redundance, I'm going to number C. Reduce redundancy and repetitive information whenever possible so that the load on working memory is lessened. My objection to this is that repetition increases retention. I don't know if anybody is fans of Chris Rock. He repeats himself a lot. He has a theme, and he says the theme, and then he tells a bunch of jokes about it, and then he comes back and he repeats the theme, and he tells a bunch of jokes about it, and he comes back, and he's doing a kind of a lecture in his comedy, because the repetition means that you remember things better. And it also applies to Donald Trump or any other person who's telling a big lie. The more they repeat the big lie, the more people are going to believe it, and the more they're going to remember it. And it doesn't matter what the source of the lie is. It could be multiple people. It could be one person saying it over and over again. It doesn't really matter. Our brain treats that all as multiple sources. Right now, for instance, I'm reading the screen to you and you're reading it yourself. So that's redundancy right there. But I think that this is appropriate for this experience. It's not adding to your cognitive load to have the audio and the visual there at the same time. You're reading to yourself, which means you're listening to yourself as well, and you're listening to me. So you've got three inputs happening there to help you understand and retain this information. And so this is an example, for instance, where I think redundancy is positive. And the last one, use auditory and visual information under conditions where both sources of information are essential, i.e. non-redundant, to understanding. This helps increase the capacity for working memory. So this means text and images, you shouldn't use them together if they're saying the same thing. So except that text and images can reinforce each other. Or if you see an image and you have audio over it, like somebody speaking, the image can conceptually reinforce the audio. So there's a question about, is it redundant or is it complementary? And I'm sure probably people can think of examples where it's redundant and unnecessary and unnecessarily increases cognitive load, but certainly it's not, I think, valid as a rule of thumb. So here we have cognitive load theory. It started in the 20th century, and a lot of 20th century educational psychology theories were like this. They start off in one area of inquiry, the expert versus novices. They make a lot of extrapolations to how to teach based on that. There's research on the original. It starts from research. It starts from, and people will say, oh, this is supported by research. But the research was on something totally different. They didn't take each of these 5 strategies and then do research on all of these. Or maybe they did. I haven't read all the research. So you're listening to me, and I'm sure I'm ignorant of a lot of what's going on. But it seems to me that they didn't do extensive research on all of these extrapolations and conclusions. They did it on the original, and then they made these things up. And then these things have been contradicted by subsequent research. And then the theory was updated in 2021, and it's changed a lot from what you see here. I think that's they got all sorts of categories and things, but basically, his theory and the popular understanding of it are totally different. Not totally different, because I think the redundancy, or he deals with the working memory here somewhere, but it's not, it's not central to his theory. And the second thing is that there's a lot of extrapolation from associated research. So let's move on to 21st century. We have almost 10 minutes left. And desirable difficulties. Now, this was coined by Elizabeth and Robert Bjork in a book called, they had a chapter in a book called Psychology in the Real World in 2009. So let me see by emojis first, who knows what desirable difficulties is? I got one. Great. Okay. So we're going to have a guessing game then. So which statement do you think, just hearing the term desirable difficulty and applying it to learning, which statement describes it best? A, people learn from mistakes, so don't make it too easy. And these are all things that I've heard it described as on podcasts or in blogs. So A, people learn from mistakes, so don't make things too easy. Let them make mistakes, let them fail, and then learn from that. B, people learn better when instruction is nonlinear. So when you go on tangents and you interrupt the instruction, you do things in different places, say, instead of all in the same place, some kind of disruption is good for learning. C, if everyone can pass, they aren't being challenged enough. So don't give out all the awards for participation and things like that. And D, making learning more difficult is desirable. It's basically, it's part of what I was saying earlier about the complexification and letting the brain do what it does in terms of sorting through things. So hold that thought, pick one, write it down, and we'll come back to this in what is quickly becoming fewer and fewer minutes. All right, I got to close this, and I got to bring something else up because I learned that this is the way to do it. So it's interesting, this format that we have to present here, AirMeet, it's designed for conferences. It's designed basically for talking heads with maybe presenting some slides. It's not really designed for a lot of interactivity. So at first, when I was designing this session or thinking about what I was going to do, I was going to have all sorts of participation and breakout rooms and things like that, and use a whiteboard or whatever. It doesn't really lend itself to that. So at first, I was thinking, how can I make this tool that they've given me do what I want it to do? And I wrote a bunch of stuff on that end. And then I realized that's not the right approach. The approach is you take the tool that you're given, instead of looking at its weaknesses and trying to get around them or fit it in, fit a square peg into a round hole, appreciate its strengths and try and use those. So some of the strengths here are the emojis, for instance, which are a great way of getting immediate anonymous feedback, and the hand up, which has not worked as well, but we had a little bit of participation that way. And part of my thinking in terms of trying to use those things and asking those questions. So you're not going to get, a lot of times interactivity is thought about as, okay, give them give them a poll, do a poll, ask them a question by a poll. They can answer it anonymously and then they'll learn the thing. And I think polls are great, but it's not always in the form of multiple choice questions. That, people use polls and they're great, but it's a little restrictive because it restricts you to multiple choice questions. It doesn't allow for a conversational sort of feel like you get with people responding with emojis or responding with a hand up and actually contributing or talking in the chat. A lot of people use chat a lot, which is good, but I'm not doing that today. But I am going to do something at the end, which is unusual, and some of you are going to like it a lot. All right, now I've talked through my in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to send you this Word document afterwards. But let's just go through it as for a few minutes while we have it up here. So desirable difficulties was some research from Bjork and Bjork. And it isn't that make training difficult. It isn't that the difficulty, this is what I said before about complexification. It wasn't just make it difficult and people are going to learn more, because there are desirable difficulties and there are undesirable difficulties. So in the left column, I have standard practices, which according to them are undesirable. In the middle column, we have difficult but more desirable. And in the right column, we have difficult but undesirable. So you know what, I'm going to use the chat for this a little bit. Study in a consistent, quiet place. So when you study for a test or whatever, or just study during the year, you should have a quiet place and should be the same place all the time. How many people believe that that is a desirable standard? Let's have some emojis. It's what we've been taught, so I would expect some people believe that. No? All right. Oh, we got one. Great. Yeah, no, okay, good. Difficult but more desirable. Can anybody in the chat, let's see if anybody can fill in that column. Study in a consistent, quiet place. What's more difficult or what's more not what we've been told that might be better for studying in the long run?